he's now in my mental Rolodex forever and evermore. So I'm so grateful to have met you and now to be on your awesome show.
Yeah. It is a lot of fun to do what we do. We get to meet amazing people. You got to meet me, and I'll just say, just like, I have a very interesting background. People want to meet me when they're
You
like,
do.
oh my God. But then the next person behind me who came next, if I remember your schedule correctly, was also an incredible person who's often considered one of the greatest football players of all time. And so you get to interact on the regular with all of these wonderful people, beautiful minds, folks who are doing incredible things. How is that shaping your life?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, it's just a huge blessing because I love to have conversations. I like to have deep conversations, really get to know someone, find out like their background and the reason their brain works the way that it works,
Yeah.
and learn from people. One of the coolest things I get to do is learn from every single person on the
Mm,
podcast, and they're all incredibly intelligent, very successful people that went to University of Phoenix that have gone on to do incredible things. And so I take a little piece and sometimes a huge piece of them with me, a huge piece of of their advice. Because one of the questions that I ask on the podcast is supposed to be beneficial to our audience, which is if you have any advice that you want to make sure that as you walk away today, the people listening or watching take away from this, what would it be? And when they let me know whatever that is, I'm usually eating it up for myself. Like, yes, that's so
no.
good. So I want
Yeah.
to say that the thing that I take back, that I most appreciate is the ridiculous wealth of knowledge. Like I'm getting my doctorate currently at University of Phoenix. This is another university within itself, the podcast.
Yeah. Totally. It really, I mean, you think about, I've been at this for over 10 years. I've got a
Wow.
black belt. I've got another degree. It's like all these things come out of all of this experience and the wisdom that
Hmm.
you gain from people. And also, at least in the case of my show, you can have contrary opinions come on, and maybe they talk between themselves on my show. Maybe I have someone come because I just want to talk to them, and then maybe I
Hmm.
talk to the antithesis of them, and you're forced to sit in this uncomfortable spot where you're like, well, you're both right, and I guess you're both wrong.
Hmm.
Maybe I need to shut up and learn more because it's so easy to jump to an opinion. And this is one of the bad things about
Mm.
the new media is it's so, I would say the word affective. It creates emotions. Like right now, one of the current topics, and we don't have to get into these things, but is the whole signal thing with classified plans and
Mm.
Donald Trump. And everybody's losing their minds. But what I don't know, and I love this question when I talk to people, when does the politics stop and the problems start? And I get it, there's some
Mm.
overlap, but when does the politics just stop? And then are we really talking about that problem, or is this more political adversarial nature, which is fine, right? That's fine, but don't act like it's precious and it's like this crisis. I'm not into
Right.
the whole doom thing of like it's an existential crisis. I mock it all the time because it's like, hey, we're doing really good at surviving those. I've heard about 30 of them in the last 2 years. And again, we're not trying to get
Exactly.
political, but the ability to communicate positive things, I think, face a
Mm.
lot of that negativity.
I have to agree. I think one of the favorite things you said to me on the podcast that really stayed with me was when you were like, "Let folks be folks." And I loved that.
Yeah.
I loved the casual way that you said it, but I also love the intention behind it. If someone is far this way and the person's far that way, that doesn't mean that we can't hang out and have fun at a
Right.
barbecue and have things in common. One of my favorite things to do on social media. I'm a digital marketer at heart, and I typically, I mean, it's been a while since I've gone on there for fun, just mostly because it's my job. So
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
evaluating data, and so I haven't really gone on there to like post fun things, but my little one was diagnosed with ADHD, and
Mm.
there's a page called Surprise Moms. I live in the city of Surprise here in Arizona, and it's just all these moms living in Surprise, and people just ask questions, and like we just support one another. And here in Surprise, I'm the minority, but I am a part of this group,
Mm.
moms, that it doesn't matter. Like we're taking care of those babies. And when I
Yeah.
tell you all moms of all ages, all nationalities, we are all on top of it. One baby has bumps where, hey, that looks like my son's this or that, and one of the things
Hmm.
I love so much about the page is that I've seen flags posted in different people's yards and things along those lines. None of that matters when the moms get together and we're talking about our babies and trying to help each other make sure that they're okay. And we're partnering. I've had people follow up with me to ensure that I've got advocates and things like that. Did the school do this? Did they say this thing? I mean, I was
Yeah.
almost overwhelming, the response that I had. So I think that honestly, with my master's in multimedia communication, I think the more we turn these screens on, the more we get sucked into believing that
Mm,
everything is isolated, but it's
yeah.
not.
It's not.
it's
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 not.
just
It's not.
not. It's
Yeah.
not. And once you're wise enough to just say, okay, well, that's what they're projecting, and that's what this channel is projecting, that's what
Hmm.
this channel is
Hmm.
projecting, and you're able to just come up with your own thoughts and opinions and let that not be your life.
Mm,
You can move
yeah.
on and just be present in your current environment. So that's my goal. I know that there's a lot of things happening right now, especially with all the different things in the media fairly recently with the government, but I'm an
Mhm.
Army brat, and so I've
Yeah.
always my parents have, no matter who's in that seat, that's the commander in chief, and
Hmm.
that's it. So
Yeah.
that's the way in which we
Yeah.
move.
One of the things that I've discovered along the way with my show, and I've had, and it's like I've had amazing people who've had amazing lives, and sometimes they've had to go through these enormous tragedies that forces them to change tracks. And you're like, oh, by the way, I'm a completely different person. I'm a better person now, even though I was burned alive, or I lost my eye, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. And these folks have incredible insight, and so, like, we'll just take moms. Moms are very protective of their kids. They
Mm.
learn everything, they know stuff, but sometimes you got to get knocked out of your mom paradigm by somebody else who's like, hey, here's what happens when something happens, and it's okay. So
Mhm.
there's a guy named Eric. I'm going to get his name wrong, but it's a German name, so it's Eric, like Weimenmeyer, or
Okay.
Wainmeyer, one of the two. And he is blind. Went blind as an adult, so he had good sight. He was an
Wow.
athlete, all of these things, but just had this congenital thing that triggered, and off he went to blind land. And so he has done things like climbed Mount Everest blind, and that's ridiculous. Like, it's like, hey, you just walk in.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's a life and death thing, and so you don't have one of your primary senses working. That's incredible. You're relying on somebody else to get you up that mountain. He
Mhm.
also kayaked down the Colorado River. You cannot swim down the Colorado River, it will kill you. And so you're in a body of
Really?
water that will kill anybody that gets in it. He's in it, he's blind, and he's going down. Look, he's got someone there with him to guide, but that person is not driving the kayak. Eric is, right? And what he does is he takes kids who are blind, and he's like, I'm going to take you out and show you adventures. I'm going to take you to these places. And the parents, God bless them, like, they're like, yes, go do that. Because what Eric does is, like, you kids right now cannot get hurt in this space, like in the Grand Canyon, and there's this giant cave. It's like, you can run as hard as you want, and you're not going to run into anything. Run. And some of these kids, it's the first time, because they're
I
blind,
had the
that
ability.
they've ever run, or ever checked the mail, or ever, because we get locked into our own world. And I think the reason I'm saying this is, as we learn these things and we understand, like, wow, there is, we have to open our minds to certain things. Look, we don't have to do anything, but if we open our minds to these other possibilities, we can crack our own barriers that we place on somebody else. Oh, you're
Right.
a this, which happens a lot in media. Oh, I was told today that I wasn't a real A's fan. Like, no, I'm in charge of that. I'm here to
I
tell you.
love that. I'm in
Yeah.
charge of that. I love
I'm in
that.
charge of what I'm a fan of. And, that's the thing. It's like, oh, no. So what you're saying is, no, well, what I'm saying is exactly what I wrote, or exactly what I said. And that's the thing. Like, we get tied into these things that I think with our new forms of media, we can knock those walls down and really become, hopefully, we have the opportunity to become more wise, more
Mhm.
graceful, more gracious, more whatever.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. One of the things that gentleman did was giving them the opportunity to see beyond their boundaries, because how often are those blind kids told, like, "Well, you can't do that."
Right.
And they
Right.
had the opportunity to push past that. They had the
Yeah.
opportunity to be told, "No,
Yes.
here, you can run and do whatever you want. You're free. Go. Try it.
Yeah.
Explore." where they typically don't have that. They're in an environment where that's designed to keep them safe. And I honestly, as a mom, it's hard. It's hard to watch your little
It
one fall
is.
and go, I got to let him get up. I got to let him figure out how to get up. I can't just let me,
Yeah,
from the literal sense and not so much, literally
yeah.
watching him, struggle in school or with, his friends or something along those lines, and knowing you're going to have to make it through that one, buddy. And I'll just be here for you
Hmm.
when you
Right.
need us to. But you mentioned that that gentleman actually climbed up Everest. We have someone, one of our alumni did the same, and he was the second person to go up Everest by himself.
Wow.
So he went up with a guide, but then he ended up the guide got sick, and so he had to
Mm,
finish going up by himself. And there was a
wow.
whole bunch of different things that happened, like his oxygen was something happened with his oxygen, and then he went blind at one point. But he made it back down, and he made it back down to his guide as well. And so he wrote this incredible book. But it's people like him that there's these stories that I realize the world is so much bigger than what's
Yeah.
on the television. The
Yeah.
world is so much bigger. People have accomplished so, and if he can push through almost dying, not having
Mm,
oxygen, and go and being blind and still making it down this mountain, I could
yeah.
probably deal with my day to day.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some real insight with that, right?
Yeah.
The and again, like letting folks be folks. I think that there's another thing there too that I probably didn't say, but maybe I should have. Is also letting part of letting folks be folks is letting them get to where they need to get to when they're able to get there. And so what that means
Yeah.
is I'm confident that forests are X. And maybe you're right. Maybe you're not. But if that person's like, I've never even heard of that, well, they're not dumb. They're not. They're just the
Right.
person that they are, and maybe they'll evolve into that position. Maybe they want to hear from you. And if we all come from a point of view of like, we all get to somewhere when we get there. Let
Hmm.
somebody else do the same thing. Like I often say, all people are bad at someone they love dying. We'll act
Mm.
out. We'll become jealous. A lot of our negative traits because we're scared. It's
Yeah.
horrible. We're hurt. And so we
Yeah.
don't act our best and we lose patience and we get in a rush to do things.
Yeah.
A friend of mine died last Tuesday and he's dropped dead. So it was sudden. And I just
I'm so
reminded his wife, we
sorry.
all know these things, but like nothing's in a rush now. Like he's going to still be dead. The paperwork just takes how
Mm.
long the paperwork takes. You don't have to do any of it the second it's available. And
Yeah.
you can just work on you, on grief, on your family, and allow people to be shitty to you because they can't reliably be their best selves in this case because they're doing the best that
Right.
they can. They're just failing at it because guess what? When people die, we suck at it.
Yeah. They're struggling too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's hard to give grace when you're in need of it.
Mm,
When you're in need of the grace, it's hard to also be the person giving the grace, because right,
yeah. Yeah.
that's a huge challenge, and I honestly believe that that's why grieving is so hard. But I do have to say, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. It's also part of life though. As you get older, the culling happens and you just lose people. And
Yeah.
this is another lesson that I've learned. I don't know if you've come across this, but just if I think of people, I let them know it. I think about them, and I didn't do it with Dan, but I should have said to Dan before he passed away at some point, any point in time, even just out of the blue, "Hey Dan, I think you're an awesome dude. Every time you say something to me, you make me think, and I appreciate that. Like, and just saying these simple things while they're alive. You know,
Isn't that
we
so
we
important?
yeah, absolutely.
I
But
couldn't
it's
agree
a good
more. I
practice. You
say
get the yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I couldn't agree more. I actively, when speaking to friends and family, ensure that I say that I love you.
Yeah,
That I say that I thank you for your time. When it comes to my friends, I as if I'm not going to see them again, which I expect that I will. But
yeah,
being an army brat, I've I've experienced some things,
yeah.
and it's important. It's important to let people know how you feel about them, giving them the opportunity to let them know how they feel about you, and then letting them go out through the day. It's also good for you throughout the day. Like, who
Yeah.
doesn't love to hear a good "I love you" and "You're spectacular"?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that you make a difference in my life.
You make a difference in my life. How
Yeah.
has your show evolved now that you're pretty far into it? I mean, you've got a lot more growing to do, of course, because you'll just continue to evolve. But how has it changed
Yeah.
since you started it?
How has it changed? Well, I have this incredible team. They've been confident and doing everything the same from the beginning, and continue just to get stronger, bigger, and better. So I'm just following behind them, thinking like, how can I be a bigger, better host? Like, so when I first started, so the actual show, as far as like the back end and the way this is like, that's been amazing from the start. But
Mhm.
I am learning in the process. I've never been a host before. I'm usually behind the screen. Like that's that's typically what I do,
Mhm.
is create the assets, and then post them, not necessarily in front of the screen. And so uh, I started off by creating doing a whole bunch of research. The team is incredible about providing like different articles or LinkedIn or like any thing that they may have been in, so that I can do some research, which is awesome. So I do a whole bunch of research. And then the night before, I kind of just dive in all my questions. I read them over and over and over again. And on my way there, I have them read back to me to make sure. And when I first started, I was just like, I had these cards and I was like sticking to the questions. And then my producer, who his name's David, he's incredible. You know, David.
Yep.
Super incredible, talented man. He's done so many things on Fox and ESPN and so on. He has so many cool stories. But he was like, Frida, you've got this, and eventually you won't need those cards. And I remember
That's
thinking
right.
like, you have no idea. I need these cards. I'm gonna forget all the things. And
Yeah.
I mean, I want to say by like the 10th show, I remember someone talking and I just put them down because like I all I wanted to do was hear what she was saying. And
Yeah.
and then that conversation came so naturally that I I just put the cards down. Now, do I create questions every single time? Yes. Do I still do all the research every single time? Yes. Do I even still print them to this day? Yes. As a matter of fact, when you were
Yeah.
there, I had them. I didn't look at them one time. I
Right.
think at this point they're just like they're there for just in case I forget. I don't know, or I go mute. Maybe I
Yeah.
don't know. It's just there for safety blanket. But yeah. So now it's so much easier just because I trust myself to communicate with the guest, and the guests are typically fairly. I mean, not you. You were not nervous at all. I loved that about you. That you made the conversation so much more fun, because you are a podcast host. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
honestly remember I was like, we could switch seats. Like, or do you want to? Do you want to?
Well, we did. Look at us right now. Look, hang on.
I know we did.
Whoop,
We
we
did.
just switched
I
seats
love
again.
it. I love it. Oh my gosh. So but so chatting with the guest and knowing and trusting myself to be able to know
Right.
how the conversation is going to flow naturally and what I believe that our audience is interested in, not necessarily all of these rigid
That's it.
questions, but more so as they're speaking, how those questions naturally come up.
Right. Yeah. I'm a big look, there's a million ways to do this, right? And because a
Yeah.
lot of people can do it, there's a lot of overlap. And so I think back to my time when I was a spy, I don't need to ask the question that everybody would ask. I need to ask the
Right.
question that no one would ask so I can find out the thing. I've got very special access, whether it's on my show or in a field in Iraq. And so it's
Mhm.
on me to ask the questions that will give answers that nobody else is getting because
Yeah.
that's the unknown unknowns. And so I always focus on that. So I'm not going to, and I haven't asked you about your background much. I know you're an Army brat. We talked about that. Maybe we get into that, but I'm not going to say, tell me about the beat. Nothing wrong with that approach, but I'm not going to do that because that can be done on another show where they're going to do things
Right.
that are more in a formula. And what I think you're learning is, yes, do the prep work. For me, I've done the prep work for the last 20 plus years. I don't need to do
Mhm.
really any real prep for a specific guest because I've done all the prep. I know the
Right.
questions. I understand the motions. I know my kata, right? I can find a question within a conversation, and I don't even always ask questions. I'll just hit the ball back to you in some way, and that kind of flow for me, uh, for this format,
Mhm.
works excellent for being a host.
I can see how that works well for you. You're so easy at having a conversation with, and you propose really great questions that make the person think. I mean, even when we were in my podcast, I remember us going back and forth, and me thinking like, "Hey, yeah, that's actually a really great point." And like I said, when you mention things, you don't necessarily know someone's cadence, if they're going to take a breath, if they, because everyone's so different. I interviewed a chief police officer whose story was incredible. This man went from like Rodney King to like chief police officer. His cadence was very slow, very intentional, very stern. And so all my bubbly, like all the energy had to come down. Right. And I had to just like lean into him, and then I have then I have others. I interviewed this young lady whose her specialty is ADHD. And she helps women with ADHD and as like his life coach become more successful in careers. That conversation was maybe the fastest podcast. I'm confident, like words per minute in that podcast. Her and I were having we were going. It was her and I in the room. And then I have people who were fairly shy, and then I'm when that happens, especially because those people, if they have a story to tell, which they all do, right? Because there's the reason they're on the podcast.
Right.
I'm going to lean in and I'm going to make sure they understand it's just you and me. Like there may be a camera here and there and all of these lights. This is about you and me. Yeah. And I just want you to talk to me and tell me your story. And I'm just here to have that conversation with you. This isn't about a podcast. This is about you telling your story and that story empowering someone else on the other screen. Like this isn't just about a platform in which you can then share it and then, we get so many likes or whatever. More so, the goal is that whatever you've dealt with, I have people that have gone through, one of my last guests, she lost her child at 8 days old. 8 days due to the baby not being born with lungs. And what she had to go through and how then she decided, I'm going to be a respiratory therapist and I'm going to live my life and focus on NICU babies for the rest of my life to ensure that this doesn't happen to another family, that families, she said, to ensure that families go home with their babies.
Yeah.
Immediate tears. Right?
Yeah.
But she needed to know that you're not on spotlight. This isn't about how many shares or anything like that. That's not at all what I'm about. I'm a very intentional person and your story is powerful. And I want another mom or someone who could relate to this situation to feel empowered by you, to hear your story and go, I think I could do it too. That's what it's actually about.
Yeah. When I think about hosting, and hosting again can be a lot of things. It can be whatever the hell you want it to be. But when I think about hosting, I think there's 3 things that you've got to do. You've got to carry the guest and monitor that. When I see you well up, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to get down there with you and allow you to be in that moment for as long as you're comfortable doing it. Maybe I even push you to stay in it longer if you're really digging into something. But I am by design looking at how you're responding, what I need to plug for you, that kind of thing.
Right.
Maybe I'm grabbing a tidbit, while I'm remote, I grabbing a tidbit, put a link up there kind of thing. I'm also paying attention to the audience. And if you say something powerful, I might say that again, because sometimes we're doing the dishes when we're listening to the show. And sometimes we're sort of absentmindedly like, oh yeah, Pete's on, and I'm just on. They're not like focused. Like, hey, everybody pay attention to what she said. There's that part of it, talking about the guest and just slowing the pace down or speeding the pace up, whatever it is, creating tension in a positive way. Sometimes a negative way. Also, what does the show need? Hey, this is the Break It Down show, everybody. You guys should subscribe, right? And like those kind of things. Yeah. You have to monitor all these things. But then there's also sub things that are not primary, but you have to also think, oh shoot, one thing I need to do right now is I need to whatever those things are. And I think you're getting that. Already a knack, but you're developing a real professional capacity to do all of these things. When I was on your show, we were talking, and obviously I'm comfortable because I'm professional. I know how to do these things, but we talked about Dwayne Wiggins from Tony, who had just recently passed away when we did the show a few weeks ago. And I got emotional because it happens that Dwayne was a big impact on this show, on our survival and our growth and our access. And it was my one chance to really publicly talk about who Dwayne was and what he meant to me. And I was able to, partly because you made me feel safe, but but also because it was important to me to express this emotionally because I
Yeah.
cared about Dwayne. And it was a wonderful moment. And you let me go into it. We dove back into it a couple of times and really just allowed that moment to be as impactful as it's going to be for anybody who watches it. Maybe nobody cares about Dwayne Wiggins, but I do. And you got to hear about it.
Yeah, but I wonder, is it so much about people being impacted by that person, or what if there's another man that maybe looks like you, is the same age as you, dresses like you, has the same interest as you, or is just thinks that you're an awesome person and doesn't think that they can be sentimental, doesn't
Yeah,
think that
sure.
they can appreciate another man respectfully, right? And
Yeah,
but they appreciate you and they like you, and now they're seeing you go through that process, thinking,
yeah,
wait a minute, I respect him. So if he could do that, so it's never, I never want to isolate or like lock people down into
sure.
into this box, like you never know how people
Yeah,
are being touched. And I've had people reach out to me talking about the podcast, and how, oh, I sent that to my sister because this person was talking about how they were an angel investor, and she's not looking for anyone to be an angel investor, but she is taken back by the fact that this person came from Tucson, in a 2-bedroom home with 8 siblings, and said nothing negative about his childhood. He said it was the best childhood and that his parents were incredible, and that they provided mentors for him, and that's what led him that way. And that is what encouraged her. She said,
yeah,
I know she lives this similar life. This is going to be helpful for her because she thinks that her kids are going to be like, oh, I don't have all the things, but she's doing so much to set them up for success. And to see this other person be affected in this way, and now he's an angel investor, knowing that there's qualifications for that, like that's pretty powerful.
that's pretty
And this,
powerful. Yeah,
like, well, yeah, I mean, you two can, she can overcome anything, and that his childhood is nothing he thought about negatively, and the likelihood of her children not thinking negatively about their childhood just because they don't necessarily have as many funds as mom may be thinking about isn't negative. As a matter of fact, I
yeah,
think some of the people that have the least money may be the happiest, just because they're not so overly consumed in
right. Yeah,
ensuring that they
there's
have that
something to be
money.
said for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. One of the things I've realized is, along the lines of what you were just saying, is if you've spent the time to be thoughtful and you really
Mhm.
worked through this, maybe you've read the book from the guest or whatever it is, and you've invested
Mhm.
time in a certain topic, you still don't own someone else's outcomes about whatever you say. That still
Right.
belongs to Frida or to Bob or to Tim or to
Right.
Jennifer. It's up to them what they take from you. And so you just offer it. And if they get a different lesson, and quite often in my life, people have said, Pete, you said something to me at one point, and I'm like, oh my God, I hope it was good. And they're like, no, it was great. It totally changed how I saw things. Like I had a conversation with a buddy of mine, and he's like, I'm going to save money because we're going to deploy, and I'm going to buy a
Huh?
Tesla. This is way back. And I'm like,
Okay.
why don't you buy Tesla stock instead?
Mm.
And he's like, holy shit, I hadn't thought about that. And so, and this is a long time ago. And
Oh my
he
goodness.
did buy Tesla stock. And so did I. And I took my own advice, which is another good lesson. And obviously that's worth a lot more money now. It's not $1 million
Yeah.
or nothing, but it's those moments. And I was so happy that he had heard that, because sometimes we just have and again, it's just like this breaking down barrier. And when you're
Mhm.
thoughtful, you just can give that lesson, and then they can decide what that lesson is. And I love that concept of just letting folks be folks where they're at their speed. And just like, I've spent time thinking about this, or I'm going to spend time shutting up about this because I haven't thought about it. And by the way,
Mm.
it's a big revelation here. I talk to high school kids from my high school every year. And one
Mhm.
of the things I'll ask them, like, what are you guys worried about? And then it's always like kid stuff, right? But there's one kid to be like, the environment. And I can look at that kid and I can say, are you going to become an environmental scientist? No. Are you going to take any kind of science degree? No. Are you part of any kind of environmental movement or doing anything? No. I'm like, stop worrying about it.
Mm.
Find something that you can impact. Go work on that, because that stuff doesn't belong to you.
Right.
And I don't know if it resonates with those kids, but it is a great lesson. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying it's not important enough to you to be directly involved in learning about it, trying to figure out how to do it. Everybody wants to do a podcast. Can you do
Right.
1,000 of them? Can you do 100 of them? Well, if not, don't worry about it. Don't have a podcast. It's no big deal. You can say, I don't care. You can say, I don't care about Syrian kids.
Right.
You don't have to actually feel their pain. You can just say, I have a life to do. I'm struggling enough, and I'm just going to not worry about Syrian kids. You can say that, and it gets to be okay because we can't take on everything.
You know what's great about that is that you're so intentional in regards to checking with your audience, finding out what their need, what their pain point is, and then giving them advice based off of that, as opposed to just, especially when you're talking to kids, especially when you're talking to high school kids, as opposed to just kind of like pushing upon them your thoughts. I recently went to, and I want to say, if it's on your mind to say, whether or not you think that it may have landed or not, always say it. Because I went to my son's favorite, he loves these French fries. It's actually like a chicken wing place. We don't eat meat, but it's a chicken wing place, and they put the seasoning on top of the French fries. He loves it. And so we're in there often. And this woman behind the register, she owns it. She has so much joy. And this day, I did not have it. This day, I just didn't have like the usual light and glow. And she asked me, she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's just." And so she was like, "Hey, you know," she's like, "You're in here a lot, and I know that you work a lot." And she goes, "Are you a control freak?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, so much so." And she said, "Okay." And she goes, "Well, let me tell you something that helps me." And I said, "Sure, tell me." And she said, "Because I'm a control freak too, I would recognize that, let's say my car broke down, then that affects how I feel. And my kids are yelling and screaming, or my spouses didn't fill up the gas tank, or whatever the case may be. And then that would affect how I feel. One day I decided, if I'm a control freak, then I need to recognize that I'm letting those things outside of myself control my thoughts and emotions. There's literally nothing that can change my thoughts and emotions outside of me. So don't give those things access. When I tell you that information, because as a control freak, just the thought of someone having the ability to manipulate or do, like, because I'm pretty meticulous. And so I never thought about it from that aspect of life. She said that to me just on a whim as I'm getting French fries. And when I tell you that day has changed the trajectory of my life and the way in which I move and communicate, I literally think of those words when I was turning my key. This is last week. I was turning my key and it broke. The whole key broke. The thing was inside, and I was like, I'm not going to let that control my day. And I used the little thing, it kept going. And so I just want to encourage you, if it's on your mind, if it's on your heart, to say, and I do the same thing at the podcast. Sometimes I even say, like, look, we may cut this out, but it's on my mind to say this thing to you. It's on my heart to say this thing to you. Because I want to make sure, and I'm gonna make sure you don't walk away without me communicating to you that whatever that may be. So as long as you continue to do that, there's someone out there whose ears needed to hear it.
There's, I think, instant for instant in your life, the thing that impacts people the most, and it's the dumbest little things, but if you drop your keys on the floor, it's always like, oh, it's like one more thing. And it's literally the easiest thing in your day to handle. And it doesn't at all have any latency. It's over. But it hits us so hard. I don't know why that is, but like you're running around, you're trying to get done, you're a little bit behind schedule, you spilled a little coffee on your shirt. That's way more your impact. And you don't like it, but you get by that pretty quick. But if you drop your keys in the trash, on the floor, on the front step, and you have to get on your knees to go grab it, you are done with that task in less than 10 seconds. But God, like, I'm having a bad day. And I'll say this all the time. I'm having a bad day. And I'm like, did I drop my key? I'm like, oh, yep, I sure did. And it'll be my stupid keys that just sit in my craw. And so I've worked to like slough that off and be like, yes, I dropped my keys. I know that's not going to bother my day. I'm going to have a good day. And I've kind of managed to mostly flip it. Look, do I have bad starts to days? Do I have things? Yes, of course, right? But dropping my keys is not reliably a bad thing anymore. Does that in any way resonate with you?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I typically have, they call it ADHD fatigue, right? So like, we're like, bing, 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 bing. And then the times we're like, and so that's when things are happening. Like I reach for my key and then my hat falls off and then I follow that and then this next, and the baby's thing, then the milk. And like, I'm, you know, you're
Hmm.
literally like
Hmm.
just frozen for a moment. I've learned in those moments to say thank you
Yeah.
every single time because I could not have the baby. I could not have the
Mm.
car. I could not have the house keys because I don't have the house. And that $7 drink that I just purchased is because I'm able to afford it.
Right. Yes.
You know, so like, yeah, I dropped
Yeah.
that $7 drink, but I can go get
Yeah.
another one. But thank you
Yeah.
that I could afford it. So I
Yeah.
when I just changed that thing around because to your point, it's like a it really gets you when things like that happen. And it's
Yes.
the smallest
I'm
thing,
having a
right?
bad day.
And
Why?
and I
I
also
dropped my
learned that
keys.
I also learned to make sure that be careful what I say. Be careful
Mm.
what comes out of my mouth and the things that I'm thinking that I'm speaking into my day. Saying,
Mm.
"Oh, I'm just having a bad day." No, I'm not. I've
Yeah.
dropped my keys. That
Right.
is not a bad day. That is a dumb move.
Yeah.
If my day is like 12 hours, 30 seconds
Yeah.
of an act, it does not control my day.
Right.
What?
Right.
You know, so we need to be
Yeah.
careful what we speak
Yeah.
into. Like, why would I tell myself I'm having a bad day? It's very powerful what you say and what you think. If you think to
Yeah.
yourself, that was silly, and I hate when those things happen, but you know what? I'm grateful that I have all of these things that I was able to drop. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then you keep
It's
moving throughout your day with gratefulness, at least, and that's the goal, at least.
I love the words gracious and graceful and grace.
Mhm.
And I don't necessarily put a biblical connotation, although it certainly has it. But I like, how do I extend grace even when I think I'm out of it? Because it turns out, this is just in Pete's world, there's always more grace in my tank than I realize. And it's funny to me because,
Mhm.
and look, this is super nerdy entomology stuff, but gracious and graceful are the same word. One's just Greek and one's Latin. And so they
Oh,
both
okay.
thought to think of a word where it's like you are full of grace. And
Mm.
like love, it's a bottomless well. And I'll be damned. Every time I think like, well, I'm all out of grace today. I just don't have it. And I'm like, look, there's more. I just checked. There's more grace in there. Why can't I just continue to try to extend grace to people? I'm not going to run out. And if it burns me, okay, great. Everything burns you at some point, but it's not going to burn me. I'm just being gracious. And that practice, it's a practice, but that practice, you're supposed to
Practice.
fail at a practice, by the way.
It's true.
Um, I love it. I love thinking about trying to be graceful. And the people you love the most, it is hard to be graceful with them because they're the people that
All
you don't
facts.
have to extend grace to.
Yes, that is very true. That is very true. But I think it's also true to give yourself grace, right?
Oh yeah.
Because there'll be times where you just don't have it. I know you're like,
Yeah.
there's more in the cup. There might not be, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay to be like, you know what? This cup is fairly dry. I'm gonna go ahead and fill it up. I'm gonna step
Hmm.
away. I'm
Yeah.
gonna read my favorite
All
book
right.
or watch my favorite show or like,
Yeah.
take a bath or whatever it
Yeah.
is for you. Let me go ahead and fill that cup right on up. Show
Yeah.
myself some grace. Because when we're giving, listen, there is an end to that. If our cup
Hmm.
isn't getting filled and all we're doing
Yeah.
is giving, what happens is by the time we get to the bottom of that cup, there may be some resentment down there. There may be some anger and frustration down there. And
Yeah.
at that point, you've depleted yourself so much, you've ignored so many of the things that you like and love to do, maybe some self-care, maybe your favorite hobby or whatever the case may be. And now you've got that resentment. Now you've got that frustration and anger. And that was your choice. That's
Mhm.
always the worst. When you reflect and go,
Well,
I made that choice.
yeah. And this is where I'm going to just push back just slightly. That's because you
Yeah,
don't run out
do.
of grace. Like maybe you've looked in the cup
Mm,
and you saw anger and resentment at the bottom of it. You looked in the wrong cup. You didn't look in the cup that's full of grace. So calm down, look back at that person, extend grace, and see what happens. You've got it. It's in there, right? But it's a practice. And so, yes, we have these challenges. That's when you have to learn to like reassess, can I be
right.
gracious here? And you don't have to be gracious in every instance of life. Sometimes, yeah, you can get pissed off, or sometimes you can be unfair, whatever, right? That everybody's allowed that. That's me being gracious. But I would say, I think we're both saying the same thing. I'm just defaulting to we always have grace. And I learned this, oddly enough, through the show because it's the great wisdom machine. And I was talking to I did a series of interviews with people that had been put in prison for the rest of their life. Either they've murdered people or striked or done something
Oh,
horrible.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. And you learn a lot about rehabilitation. And one of the things I pulled out, and these are really wise people because they've had a lot of time to be thoughtful.
Mm.
And they said all people are redeemable. All people are redeemable. That's the default. If you fail at that, then you're failing at the very fringe of that one didn't work out. But
Mm.
all the rest of those people that we wrote off, to include pedophiles, rapists, all these people that are so vile, we can't possibly imagine redemption. We have
Yeah.
to say redemption is possible here. And I need to fail at redeeming this person or the system or whatever, because that is where the point of failure is. And now you're failing way over here instead of deciding before you ever start that some person is unredeemable. That shook my world because I didn't want that to be true.
Mm.
But I haven't been able to figure out that it isn't since then.
I'm not going to challenge you that it isn't. I'm going to do is say, remember that high school kid when you were like, are you involved in the environment?
Yeah.
I don't. That's not my calling. That's not my purpose. I
Right.
definitely. I mean, I have littles, so like that would be a challenge for me.
Sure.
But again, not my calling, not my purpose. I'm
Sure.
not. I don't have. So I have the ability to show grace to others in other situations, and I know that whoever and because you have the opportunity to speak to these people, to learn more about them, and to have that grace. And even with your past experience, I mean, you've seen so much, you've done so much that you can understand the great lengths of grace that could and may need to be given. So I stand on the fact that I am not the one to be making. I don't need to judge.
Yeah, and that's fine.
It is not up to me.
Yeah, you don't have to say everybody's redeemable, right? But that is a standard.
But I do believe that, by the by, I do actually believe, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do believe that everyone's redeemable. It's more so me showing them grace. Like, do I want to be in their company? Do I want to spend time with them? Do I want to help them recover? Like, no, not necessarily. But I also know that it's not my place, right? Like, it's not my place to judge them. It's not my place to help them recover or to lead into another way. There's other people that are better designed and suited to be able to do that.
One of the guys I had in this series, his name is Matt, and he killed a guy. And he deserved to go to jail, and he was guilty. And then he got out, and he is very, very, very well adjusted because, again, he's had to sit with all of these things, go through therapy, earn the right to get released from prison. And I asked all these guys, like, when did you figure it out? And then when did you complete your work? And and look, it's a tiny sample size, but every single one of them, independent of each other, they don't know each other, said, right around 11 years, I'm rounding, right? 11, 12, 13, 15, 12, whatever. That's when they figured out what the work was ahead of them. And they started surrendering that I built this. I'm culpable, whether I was the person that pulled the trigger or not. I was there to harm people. Like, all these things are things that they said. And I figured it out. I had completed the work right when the board approved my parole. And then each of them said, I figured out finally that the parole board was not my enemy. They were my advocate. And they speak for the people. And they have to vouch for me. And I've murdered someone. And so, of course, they're on my side, but I haven't done the work. Wow.
That's powerful.
And then when they, and when you realize that they are your advocate and they are vouching for you, and they're saying, this person is safe to bring out to society, even though they murdered someone or were involved in a murder in some way, that's a big deal. And they all said that. And it's crazy when you think about what is possible when you allow that. And then we walk around high and mighty. Would we forgive that person? Would we forgive Matt? So Matt's working at Stanford as a janitor. And they want to bring him on full time from the contract company he's working for. They like his work. And he's like, hey, listen, I've got this significant felony in my past, so I would love the job here. And they're like, yeah, don't worry about it. It won't be a big deal. We'll work around that. They did not work around that. They fired him. And that's one
from the janitor position?
Yes.
Oh.
And against law, right? And also, this is hippie liberal universities in California. It's Stanford. And so what happens now is, like, we've judged this guy as a community, as a society, and look, you're a mom. If you got your kid at Stanford, do you want to know that there's a murderer on the janitorial staff? Probably not. But you have to withstand that because we have to allow that person the ability to have a regular life now. They've satisfied the state, which is us.
Wow.
It's really hard to do that, though. It's easy to say that. It's easy to preach. I'm going to preach about what you're everybody's redeemable, that kind of thing. But the fact is that's where the work is. Like, we also have to allow them to be redeemed.
Right. Man, that's a hard one. I'll tell you what. I'm grateful that I'm not in the position to have to make those decisions because that is a hard one.
Yeah. You talk about jobs you don't want to have to do. I don't want to be on a parole board,
Never.
And I don't know if I'd be too soft, too mean, too whatever, but it's a board for a reason, because old softy Pete is like, oh, come on, let's give you a shot, and then the other lady's like, absolutely not. And you gotta, So, and I wanted to just change gears a little bit here because we're going to run out of time here pretty quick. A lot of what you do, believe it or not, is spy stuff. It's spy work, and you're really good at it. And I know what good spies look like. Women are great spies, not because they're conniving or deceitful, but primarily because in most of the world, you all are invisible, or you're so alluring, people lose their fucking minds. And they're like, there's a woman in here. And they like, and their mind is blown. And it's not the only way to approach it, but it's such a head start. And so when you're talking to people, you're doing the things, you're controlling the conversation in a way that's very easy and comfortable. And so I wanted to commend you on that. And I didn't get a chance to say that when we were talking before, even though I said you did a great job. But part of that is because I've seen a lot of people collect. There's a lot of styles, and you would have been a great spy. You understand all of the perspectives that you have to collect, respect, introspection, all the specs. You are capable to see those and leverage them to your advantage to get the words that come out of people's mouths.
Thank you. I honestly, it's a blessing. All of my degrees are aligned to me communicating. I have a communications degree and a multimedia communications degree, but my goal was behind the camera, and University of Phoenix just trusted me to do this thing. And so I thought maybe I should trust myself. And so it's been awesome. And hanging out with you was so cool. I mean, you've just done over and beyond what I think any other human can really understand and contemplate. And the smile that you have, the joy that you have, the grace that you have, I felt that immediately. Like I said, you walked away and I was like, we are friends. So know that we are stuck together. You're stuck with me now because you were just a joy to be around, and you have experienced so much. You have the right to be like, no, the world sucks. There's bad people here, and I don't.
There are. This is true.
And you've experienced it head on. Like, how? If I can ask you a question on your own podcast, how do you do that? How do you take from the frame of mind, experiencing the things that you have, and still come at it with so much joy and interest and desire to learn and grow?
I failed at it a lot. That's the first thing. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I don't typically forward my mistakes because those aren't the lessons that are all that important. And a lot of times the mistakes you have to make yourself. And so I can talk about the mistakes and everything, but I've made a lot of mistakes in that. One of the things I realized was part of this redemption idea, this independent genesis of ideas, but I mean, you look at how much open we are talking to each other, right? And even though we've only seen each other a couple of times, and one time is through a screen, I focus on building trust. And so if I'm out and about, and this has actually happened in real life, and I'm doing my spy work, and someone's like, are you a spy? I say the answer, yes. And if I ask you a question you don't like, don't answer it. I'm not here to harm anybody. I'm here to understand what you guys are doing so I can help us be better partners to you all. And that's true. And then I do the same thing to the American side. Yes, I am not worried about harming you guys. I'm trying to help you do better. And every commander is like, well, then all right, show me how you do it. And so then we get information. But because I focus on building trust and I don't focus on manipulation or deceit, I am able to get people to open up to me, to trust me, because I'm trying to build trust with them. And it's on me, the person who has the trust bank, to extend it to you. And look, in America, it's easy because we don't have these automatic, for the most part, we don't have these automatic distrustful things about who we are, what we look like, what God, we for the most part don't care about that. Is there some of that? Yeah, sure. But you can work through it. But that's the biggest thing is if I can start to develop very low risk trust with you, now we're past rapport. And there's some rapport things, but set rapport aside, it's not easy, but trust is beyond that. It's harder. And once that trust happens, I'm able to communicate in a way that's much more open. I can disagree with you. I can say this to you, Frida, I'm going to ask you a question. It's going to be tough, but I promise you can take it because you're a tough lady. I can now ask you anything I want. And Becca, I am a tough lady. Go ahead. You send me that question.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and you'll do it, right? Because you trust me that I'm not trying to harm you, but I've softened the blow a little bit. Like, you said this, I think you're totally wrong and crazy. You're going to have to explain yourself, and then you can, and then you might even come back with even more emotion. Now I've got you going in a good direction. I've got those emotions coming out. I can decide which ones are there. Let some of them blow by me, but find the one that works for what I'm trying to do. And I can leverage that. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes complete sense. I'm curious if you think that if others, just like right now with any tension that could be possibly happening in America or any other countries for that matter, if we moved from the place that you do, from a place of curiosity, a place of honesty, a place of transparency, what do you think that there would be like less tension in the world? Do you think that we would communicate better? Like, how do you think that would affect the world in itself?
I would say in general, everything's a competition. And when you're losing the competition, you have more access to more tools because you're losing. And so you might grab a pipe instead of your fist, or you might grab a gun instead of your backpack. And so when there's exchange of power and it's not going your way, boy, things can get really nasty. When you run out of words, look out. You can't talk this out anymore. Oh, what's going to happen now? Are we going to have adults around you? And even if you're an adult, like when two parents have to exchange their kid in front of the sheriff's office, that is not ideal.
No.
And so I don't think that goes away. I think that's a human nature that we will have conflict. We do get emotions. We let those things run away from us. Sometimes we've been hurt too many times and we won't stand another second of it. And folks get to be that hurt. So I don't think you can get by it, but I think you can mature in a way that it's less about you. It's less about, like, we often talk about ego. We don't always talk about the id, that compulsion to, like, I'm just going to do that. Boy, I was compulsive as hell when I was younger. I'm still a little bit compulsive, but now I can look and be like, Pete, you know better than that. And then I go, I know better than that. And I don't actually just go define myself and do it now, right? Because I've matured. But yeah, look, I think in general, if you get out and you relate to people, well, then you're relating to people. And that's a good thing. And you and I both know if you're not on this thing, which lies to you, and you just go talk to people, whether they're in Maricopa County or in Palm Beach County in Florida, you're going to find people that are wonderful, that have problems that they can't solve, that, whatever. You're going to find all kinds, and you're going to realize we have a big, beautiful nation. Go out and see it and experience it. And I defy you to say, I've met a bunch of fill in the blanks, whatever those are, whatever you don't like. You're just not going to see that. You're going to encounter people you don't agree with, but it's a big nation. Go meet one more person. You'll be like, oh, that person's fine. Oh, that person's fine. And all of a sudden you realize big, beautiful place, big, beautiful people, but you got to participate in it. You got to want to do that.
It's so important. The power of conversation. And if I haven't learned anything within this time being the host of Degrees of Success, it is definitely the power of conversation. I was initially so intimidated by all of you guests with these degrees that you already have from the University of Phoenix, and you're on the podcast because you have done incredible things in the world, and we're telling other people about, hey, look at these amazing alum that have done these things that are outrageously incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to them, me, little Frida, so I was so very intimidated when I first started chatting. And I'll have to use one of your quotes. After learning and talking and becoming friends with these people, they're just folks being folks. They are kind people, and honestly, the more successful, the more kind. The more outrageous the title, the more that they're trying to like help people and teach people and guide people. Servant leadership seems to be a consistent character trait throughout this whole thing. And so just for me alone, having conversations with these people, I'm learning that opening up, having conversations, hearing people's ups and downs, and recognizing, like, if you could do that and get what you are now, and not even necessarily from like a success, but like, I mean, your family's good. Like you've broken generational curses. You've broken generational curses. Like a generational the lack of finances, or like when you see that type of change and how they've like and they're bringing other people with them. I've taken this person and they're doing this, and I'm guiding my team to do this. When you see that, and the person that their drive now is to pull people and guide people also for betterment, you're straight. I mean, I'm just honored to be near and around these people and to learn more every day. And like I said, I've learned from you, and if I've anything, even on this podcast, how essential grace is and joy.
Yeah. Hopefully I listen to myself.
Please.
Right.
Please. But you know what? You're talking about grace and joy when you've lost a friend.
Sure.
2 days ago?
Yeah.
2 days ago, right?
Yeah. Well,
I wouldn't be functioning.
The Tuesday before, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's new news. I found out Thursday last week that he had passed away. Yeah. And you're right. Look, I've had a lot of experience with death, and I understand that it's inevitable and you lose people. And sometimes, look, you just have to deal with it. And the pace of death in my life is not going to get less until I have my own death. Right. And so it's just a thing that I've become good at. And I'm a person of words like you. And I'm often the person that finds out pretty early on. And it's like, can you let people know? And now it's on me to put those words together. And I think about that. Frida, I think about this a lot. When you die, someone's going to write about 150 words about you. And that's going to be it. And I always try to break that 150 word limit. Even if I have nothing to say, I find the words and I say something amazing about that person. And you don't have to do like the bio thing. You certainly can, very normal form, but I always try to find something else, a story or whatever it is, because I want that person to have that one last little thing that I can give them, and I can give them more than 150 words.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. And it's meaningful. When I was 25, my boyfriend was murdered, and it was the worst thing ever. There was someone in the house prior to him. He just passed the LSAT by himself, just read the book, passed the LSAT and was given a scholarship to go to law school. And so he was moving into one of his family's properties that somebody else was in prior. And so mom, dad, and brother were helping, and he was taking a load by himself. And while he was there, like 3 cars pulled up and they were looking for the other person. Well, my ex-boyfriend at the time is 6'8", about 280. I imagine they were intimidated when he opened the door, and when they were looking for this person, I imagine he was just going to let them in, and they took him out right then. So that was the worst day ever. And I remember at the funeral, the stories that people were telling, and how in a moment where you're just devastated, how you could see that person doing that thing. Like I could hear him laugh like that. Oh yeah, that was. Oh yeah, that was. And it was like an opportunity to just reflect. Yeah. And bring joy in a place where you're brokenhearted. So know that what you're doing is important. Being intentional and saying, I'm going to go outside of that 150. I'm not going to just say he was born on this day, he did this in the middle, and then he left us. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to tell you something that sticks with you, that even in this moment could possibly put a smile on your face, or could give you a moment to hear his voice say the thing that I'm saying. It's important. It's refreshing, and I'm confident that the people that are there would appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. So when I wrote about Dan, if you'll indulge me for a second here, I love in-betweenquels. So sequel, prequel, whatever. And then there's these in-between moments in general, I call them. Mm-hmm. And look, we were both too busy second to last time I saw him, right? But I'm like, hey, I'm coming through San Jose from Capitola, from the coast in California. And if you want, I'll break off for an hour and we can grab a pint, something like that. And he's like, I'm absolutely too busy to do that. So let's meet at this place. And so we did it. Didn't have to do it. I didn't have to reach out. He didn't have to respond. We easily could have, and it would have been no harm, no foul, right? Mm-hmm. But we took that in-betweenquel moment and we just said, hey, let's make this little life moment. And we talked about what he was up to. I talked about, standard stuff, nothing earth-shattering. No one was talking about anything crazy. We had a beer and then we got on about our day. And we saw, but when you take these moments, and my buddy Jeff reminded me, he came out to California, but all about in Joshua Tree. And he's like, "Do you want to come out and have dinner with my crazy family?" I mean, look, and he's like shaking his head, no, like, "You don't have to." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll get in the car and drive 3.5 hours to come see you. Of course. You're in
I
town
love
from Tennessee.
that.
You've come all this way, and you still think you might have time for me?"
Yes.
Yeah, I can get in my car and drive. And I drove out to see his weird ass family and their pig that they had in the house and all these things. Who cares about all that? Like, this is your
Yeah.
family. And we sat down, we had a meal, and it was wonderful. And I think that these moments, and this was what I liked about Dan. He came I lived down in Orange County, and so his family was Anaheim because his family is from Anaheim area. And he's like, "Hey,
Mm,
that time, pop over to our hotel and let's just hang out for a little bit." And so I did. And that was the last time I saw him. It's those moments that he would say yes to, that I would say yes to, that build these magical things. Like, I love a nightcap of friends. Like, "Hey, do you just want to stay up a few minutes longer and just have a drink or something?" Now, I say
yeah.
it can be a coffee, it can be a water, it can be whatever.
Yeah.
And so we do that. And I wanted to stack so many of those moments with the people that I care about that I'm like, wait, which time is that? Which amazing moment was it? I'm going to tell you one more of them. And I added this in Dan's thing that I wrote about it. I used to do this cross country charity ride. My friend Scott would ride a motorcycle. I would follow him in my truck, and we'd have a whole bunch of other people with us, motorcycles, fire trucks, whatever it's going to be. And we would go across the nation. At the end of the day, you're just exhausted because every day is hectic, this long hours and everything else. And I said,
Hmm.
"We're in New Orleans. We're absolutely going to go over to Cafe Du Monde. It's late at night. We'd all rather be in bed, but we're going to go and grab beignets, just the four of us, Danielle, my friend John,
Mm,
Scott, and we had beignets because of course
yum.
we would, and yeah, yum, right? Fun, coffee and beignets, middle of the night. Now we're going to go to bed and we'll just miss a little bit of our sleep. But we did that thing. There was that time when we went to Cafe Du Monde, world famous, and so that's like the thing that Dan and I were able to share a few times. And these moments
Hmm.
matter. Pete would say it's the sweet
Yeah, they
stuff
do.
in life. Like, life's already here, but these, like a little bit of sugar you can put on there. It's like these little moments where you interact with someone and you just, no agenda, no nothing, just time.
Right. Right. And you don't realize how important it is because you don't know when the last time you're going to see someone. When my grandmother passed, all the things, like all the intentional times that she took, like when she just had her friend drive across town just to see us, just to be,
Yeah.
she's like, "I can't drive anymore, but I'm just going to come." And I remember being like, "Hey, Granny, like, what are you doing?" Or when I was working at another university and I was the event planner for a groundbreaking, which was huge for, like, at the time, for like what I was doing. I was putting a lot of time into it, and
Mhm.
everyone surprised me. And my grandma came out there with her, and I was like, "Stop it!" And I had like her necklace on because I was just wanting to like be close to her, and here she is, like, and when she passed, all those things come flooding in, all those intentional moments, all that intentional loving, wanting to make sure that that person knows that you care about them, or that they're important, or whatever they're doing is important. And I want to say the same thing about you. I am off today, and my little one,
Well,
I put him to sleep like right before the pod. Just, ooh, let him
mhm.
stay asleep. and and then shortly after we end, I'm picking up my other. But I said, despite the fact that I knew that I was going to take today off, when I knew that I was scheduled, I was like, "Oh, I'm making time for people. Like,
Oh,
it's not a
see,
problem. I'm
right.
I will ensure that whatever I have to do, I will be on his podcast
Yeah,
because he's
yeah.
an intentional person and I want to be there for him. I intentionally want to have this conversation with him now and again and again and again, whether it be recorded on the pod, or just chatting, or if one day you're back in Arizona or I'm out there in California. So I just want you to know that I'm grateful for our friendship. I'm grateful for the
Love it.
conversation, and I love how intentional you are. But I just want you to know that you were also worth the intention. And today you got it.
Ah, I love it. I love it. Look at you closing my show up like a host. I'm gonna let that be the thing. All right, so everybody, I guess, should we put a link? Do you want to promote the podcast officially here, or are we just
Oh
gonna
my
find out? What do
gosh,
you want
I
to do?
would love to. I mean, I
Okay.
guess I have it here, but so the Degrees of Success podcast, you can find it everywhere you listen to your podcast. But of course, you can also find us on YouTube. You just want to look up Degrees of Success. This is where we get the opportunity. I am your host, Frida Richards, and I get the opportunity to interview our incredible alumni and all the awesome things that they do. Find out where they came from, the things they've overcome, and how they currently use their success to lift others up.
I hope this says the words I wanted it to say because my cataracts are blooming, and so
It looks
I think that
great.
says host Degrees podcast. And I
You
want to
did it.
make sure I say this out loud. A lot of people mock University of Phoenix. None of them have a degree from there because my degree was in person with pros who did things like I learned budgeting from a guy named Bentley Erdworm who did budgeting for a living. I learned project management from a guy that worked at the Huachuca Proving Grounds on a project out there. I learned budgeting from a guy who ran a contract with, among other things, Weyerhaeuser for the Aerostat program at Fort Huachuca. I mean, I learned people who this is how you budget. This is how you decide all of these things were given to me in a classroom setting. And by the way, all of my peers that I went to school with were all professional people too. So this is how this applies in my work. So I would read the book, have no idea what it said. And then I would learn what the book said because all of these brilliant people around me were teaching me about how they all did their stuff. And I swear to God, every day when I was in combat, I was part TV reporter, whatever, news reporter kind of thing. Of course, I was a spy, but I was also this guy that had this University of Phoenix master's degree in organizational management running through my head going, oh, this and this don't equal something. This is a point where I can pay attention. And so when the commander is desperate for me to answer all these questions, I'm like, yeah, those questions are all great, but right here you have a problem, and I can address that right now and get you answers. That I attribute absolutely 100% to the education I got at the University of Phoenix.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things that we pride ourselves in. The majority of our professors are actively inside or currently doing that thing. So if you are interested in business, your professor most likely is very successful currently in business. It's something that we're very proud of because you need to learn from people that are doing the thing.
I love it. All right, everybody, this is Frida, and she is wonderful. Go check out Degrees of Success. You'll love that. And I guess I've got another show I'm going to post up here in a little while with somebody else, but I appreciate you all for watching. I appreciate you, Frida, for hanging out with me. Anything you want to say in closing before we wrap this up?
I'll say what I say at the end of every podcast, that my name is Frida Richards. It has been awesome to hang out with you. It's always awesome to hang out with you, Pete. And I'm just reminding you that your next chapter just might be your best one.